Welcome to Morning Talk Show. Today is my interview with Mark Sargent. He is a leading light in the flat earth movement and subject of the Netflix documentary Behind the Curve, which I recommend watching. I've been interested in Mark for a while because he's the likable, accessible face of the flat earth movement. And so, as I suspected, he was a really great guy to talk to, very open and honest, willing to talk about anything. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. For the first few minutes, I hadn't actually pushed record on my camera, so it's just Mark for a little bit, and then I come in. If you like this kind of content, then like and subscribe. I'd like to bring you more conversations with interesting people who are sometimes off the beaten path and sometimes not. Thanks very much for watching. All right, I'm talking to Mark Sargent, the leading light and likable guy of the flat earth movement. Something that I've been wanting to do for a long time. But I'm not going to talk about myself first. I will talk about my relationship to the flat earth and we can get into that. But briefly, for someone watching who doesn't know about you, can you tell me how you got into the flat earth, like your introduction and your story about that?
Sure. I had an opinion by 2014. I had an opinion on just about every conspiracy that you could think of, and I still do. But I still hadn't looked at flat earth because flat earth is ridiculous. It's silly, and nobody ever wants to look at it. I don't encourage anyone listening to this to look at it.
Right.
But I looked at it, and I thought, okay, I can shut this thing down in a few days. 9 months later, beginning of 2015, I gave up trying to shut it down. The t-shirt literally reads, I became a flat earther because I tried to disprove it or debunk it or whatever you want. And so I made a series of videos and put them out on the internet called Flat Earth Clues, which is more or less a cry for help. It said, okay, guys, I can't prove the globe anymore in a court of law. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where I screwed up here. And here's my email address, my phone number, my real name. I try to be as transparent as possible. And that's how I got into it. And that was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And now here we are, conferences and a documentary and everything else later.
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah, so. I loved the documentary. I'd been waiting for that for quite a while. And I honestly would have gone to the conference in Edmonton if it hadn't been a little pricey for me.
Oh,
but
no, that's all right.
Yeah, but a little bit of my background, I guess flat earth has been my guilty pleasure for a while. Around about 3 years ago, I'm guessing it was about 3 years ago, my daughter was born, and to give my wife some sleep, my daughter and I would sleep on a little bed in our living room. And for some reason, even though I was ridiculously tired, I couldn't sleep. And so I brought up flat earth videos. When did you actually get on the scene? When did you when did you start making videos in earnest? You said
the first video I made literally was February 10th, 2015.
2015. Okay.
Yeah, 2015.
So I didn't know about you at the time, and I watched so many of these things, and I didn't know exactly what was keeping me going with it, because I never got convinced. I would get drawn in, as you know, the feeling of with the conspiracy, you get drawn into that world. And basically I felt like there was something there that I couldn't I couldn't stop thinking about, even though I never got fully convinced. And at the time, the leading, I don't know, the most well-spoken person that I could find in the movement was Eric Dubé. Sure. And I came pretty quickly to realize that he was a bit of a troubled individual, or at least that's my take on it. Sorry, Eric, if you're listening. I don't want to slander anybody, but basically I was excited about the idea of there being a leading light who could actually talk to people, and then I heard you talk to what was his name? The British guy.
The guy that was married to Katy Perry.
Yeah.
Russell Brand.
Russell Brand. Yeah, I heard you talk to Russell Brand, and I was like, oh, here's our guy. Finally, we've got our guy, to talk to the world about this. And sure. And so I've been thinking a lot about what it means, and it's really definitely in my head. Like when that Antarctica treaty happened, and when the Falcon Heavy happened, I went straight to YouTube to get your reaction, which I knew would be uh, well, I knew that it wouldn't convince you basically immediately.
Right.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, I've noticed there's three types of videos about the flat Earth:
Hmm.
people who agree, people who believe the Earth
Yep.
is flat,
Yep.
people who disagree and are generally interviewing you very angry, which
Hmm.
always is always saddening to me, or people who don't involve a flat earther at all and make a video about, well, here's why people believe in the flat earth, and it's
Hmm.
so condescending. I'm sure you've
Yeah.
seen some of those, but they're like, well, some people are crazy. And I just, it's always been so unsatisfying to me because I don't think that you're crazy.
Mm.
And so I wanted to talk to you about what's going on in society that's actually making a space for the flat Earth. So
Okay.
forgive me, I'm trying not to be wordy and do all the talking because I'm the
No, it's okay. That's
most
fine.
interested in what you have to say. But to me, I see the flat Earth movement as a fascinating case of grassroots, like true grassroots. Like I've never gotten the
Right.
feeling that there's anybody like with big money pulling the strings. There's no George Soros. There's, you know what I mean? Like, I don't get the feeling that you're a super wealthy guy who's keeping it going for, some nefarious reason. And so it's like, sure, there's always been conspiracy theorists and there's always been conspiracy theories, but
Right.
this is the big one. This is the one that encompasses all other theories. And I'm sure I'm sure that there are even people in the flat earth movement who go a lot further than you.
Yep.
So, what is it about the psychology of the West in 2019 that is drawing people towards this movement? And so, I don't want to just ask you that question directly because it's a really difficult question to ask. So, I have some
I
idea.
could, I
Yeah.
could,
Oh yeah.
I could
Go
give it a
ahead.
shot.
Yes. Sure.
Actually,
I'll ask you directly.
why,
Let me
why,
know.
why is it happening now? I mean, that question's actually came up even in 2015, 2016. It's like,
Right.
why now?
Yeah.
Why here? Why, flat Earth is not a new thing. It's been around for a long,
Yeah.
long time. In fact, even before globe Earth, there was flat Earth,
Right.
and flat Earth was the thing for. I don't care what people say. No, no, we disproved it thousands of years. It's like, really? Because I've got some wonderful illustrations of every culture ever drawing the same snow globe forever.
Right.
Where it's a flat enclosed world with a dome over the top.
Hmm.
And um, sorry, there's a little bit of an echo, but we're okay.
Oh, is that,
Oh,
should I
you're
do
okay.
something?
You're okay.
Okay.
So why now? Three big things. One, of course, would be high speed internet. Two would be social media, and three would be, oh, I don't know, how about 6 billion smartphones
Yeah.
in the world? We can now disseminate information everywhere very, very quickly, if not instantaneously. I mean, if you wanted to send out a major headline across to all countries simultaneously, you could
Right.
do that now.
Right.
Um, that and people, for whatever reason, and I think we're actually kind of helping this, is the combination of it's a weird thing in the United States where we've become very, very, very polarized, even more polarized than ever before. You identify by who you vote with or what your demographic is. I mean, you really identify with it now. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're a vegan, it's like anyone who's not a
Right.
vegan is your enemy. If you're not a Democrat, you're a Republican,
Yeah.
and so on and so on and so on. But you combine that with a lack of hate speech where nothing is tolerated anymore. So you can't go after any particular demographic group.
Mm.
So we're not supposed to yell at, we're not supposed to criticize, oh, who are the big three that are always picked on? Jewish people, black people, and women,
Hmm.
right? And then
Okay.
everybody else. And so all of a sudden you've got flat Earth. Well, you can't, yes, you can pick on them, but you can't pick on them as much as you used to be able to,
Okay.
where back in the day. So now it's almost like this hatred slash acceptance that's
Right.
that's happening, where
Right.
you're right, there's some people, it's like, yeah, well, flat Earth there. In fact, the documentary was a perfect example of that, where they were perfectly fine filming it, and literally they filmed almost the entire movie. It's like, well, they're harmless, they're not, they're not affecting anyone really. You know, they're just a zany bunch of people. And then all of a sudden they got to the conference and that 12-year-old kid walked up to the microphone. And that's when the tone changed. That's when it's
Mm,
like, okay, okay, now we got to take this more seriously because, you know, for the children.
right.
And
Yeah.
so it's this weird paradox. And
Mm,
that, and of course, come on, let's face it, it's the most interesting. If the universe runs off novelty, it is the most interesting thing we've had in media in decades.
oh,
I mean, what story is more interesting than Flat Earth?
absolutely. And I think that's, I mean, I think that's been my thing, you know, and I've never, you know, I guess I've had a few chuckles occasionally, but I've never been, in general, it's not been my interest to laugh at this phenomena.
Right.
And so I think that I'm kind of some kind of weird personality type where I can actually handle real diversity of thought. I think that's something that I appreciate about the flat earth.
But did you laugh at it in the beginning?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
That's just it. And that, and by the way, that speaks to the power of the topic. Everybody hates this thing. Everybody hates flat Earth. I mean, I hated it even more. I used to collect antique globes. That was one of my little
mm,
hobbies. I'm not
yeah.
kidding you.
For the
So
record,
how do you think
I
I
know
felt?
this stuff because I literally have watched your videos, but I'm glad you're saying it for the sake of
Yeah,
other
yeah.
people.
I mean, it's so it is. If everyone starts out in the same point, which is they hate it, and then there's a big chunk of people now, it's like, you know what? Not that bad. It's actually quite feasible.
Right,
I find that with any other topic.
right.
It's such a strange thing.
Yeah, I think that you have a really good point about its kind of novelty and alienness, though, because people kind of love to hate it, but like you say, they're not sure exactly if they should be mad about it, like what it's doing wrong. But you know, the closest thing I've seen is people who feel that science denial
Right.
is this major problem. And I guess I'm sympathetic to that idea in theory, that, you know, like people who say there's no climate change, if you're a firm climate change believer, then that really angers you. And if someone believes in the flat earth, it's sort of like, okay, you're also denying science. And so, you know, uh, so you're denying climate change. I don't know. Personally, I'm not angry about it. And I think that it is, I actually, you know, I don't think we're working towards this world where everybody believes the same thing. That does not
Right.
seem like what we're going to do. So, you know, I appreciate, I kind of feel like the flat earth is flying. Well, this is a lot of alliteration. The flat earth is flying the flag of real intellectual diversity in the world. And
Sure.
so, in that way, I wish you well.
Thank you.
One thing I did want to touch on briefly is what part like religious faith or pseudo religious faith plays in the flat earth movement. Like how would you describe your relationship to any kind of faith?
My relationship started out pretty easy. I was raised in a fairly strong born again Christian home where church wasn't just on Sundays. You also had youth group and
Me too.
vacation Bible school and even Camp Malibu, which was up in Canada, or still is. It's still very popular in the Christian community. But then I fell away from that because I left the island. You know, I grew up on a rural island up in the northwest of the United States, up north of Seattle,
Okay.
near Vancouver and Victoria and places
Okay.
like that. I mean, in fact, you could see Victoria from just a few miles up the road here.
Awesome. My
And,
wife has been to Malibu many times.
oh, well, there
Camp
you go.
Malibu. Yeah, she was a young
Yeah,
lifer.
yeah.
So
I went back in the 80s. I was Camp Malibu was a different place back then.
yeah,
I don't know why I was speaking with a British accent.
please do.
So and then I got into university, and I know you Canadians or call it university because
College.
college is a completely different thing.
Sure.
Although down here in the States, college and university are exactly the same word.
Yeah, I know.
And I
I'm
fell away from it.
originally American, so I know that divide as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I went to college here, but in the States, I might have said university. Anyway, keep going.
yeah. Well, I lived a year in Victoria. I was told, but pretty much in no uncertain terms. It was like, do not say college when you're up in Canada if you're talking about university, because a
Yeah,
college is a technical college and a university is a
right.
university. It's
Yeah,
like, okay, but
elitism.
down here, whatever. So anyway, short version was I got into the tech field, fell away from religion, and when I was out on my own, living in Colorado for 20 years, I also fell away from the church, and I can't. In fact, I never attended church when I was over there, unless it was a wedding or a funeral. I never went to a church. And then I got into flat Earth, and all that changed. It immediately snapped me back into spirituality, and not to where I was going to church every Sunday. In fact, it was a deeper understanding of spirituality,
Mm.
where, and I've heard this from a lot of people in the community. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, for those who don't know, at least half of the American flat Earth community members are strong Christians. And
Mm.
yes, the other four major religions play a part, but Christianity is definitely the biggest. Mostly because of the people who Bible literalists who went into the Bible, King James, and with a fine-tooth comb, and said, look, pretty much every chapter or verse, with the exception of Isaiah 40:22, talks about a flat world.
Mm. What does
And
Isaiah
I
40:22 say?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, what does Isaiah 40:22 say? Do you know?
Oh, I'm sorry. Isaiah 40:22, he who sitteth upon the circle of the earth.
Oh, okay.
But even that is tough,
Right,
because
because it could
circle
be round, but a circle.
yeah, in the ancient Hebrew,
I mean,
circle is
flat.
not globe, it's not ball, it's not sphere. It's circle. A dinner plate is circular. Your dining room table is circular.
Right.
Anyways, so it was really interesting, because there's a real quandary down here where pastors are hanging on to Isaiah 40:22 like it's got veto power over the rest of Christianity. I mean, including Genesis and
Mm.
Isaiah and
Hmm.
every other book you can think of. They think that this, because they don't want to go to their congregation and say, oh yeah, by the way, we're gonna have to take a step back and revisit the Bible from a
Right.
flat Earth
Right.
standpoint.
And there's
And
even the
so
one flat Earth guy who's largely theological. He's got facial hair. I can't remember his name. I can't remember
Rob
his
Skiba.
Rob Skiba. There you go. Yeah, Rob Skiba. So
Yep.
he would be kind of the extreme end of the tying in religion and flat Earth.
Absolutely. He was one of my early conversions back in 2015. As a matter of fact, he was one of the first guys that interviewed me. Oh yeah. I got him in 2 shows, and I wasn't even trying. It just happened to be that way, where
Okay.
he heard me on a different podcast as he was driving to
Yeah.
something, and then listened to it again on the way back and said, I got to bring this guy on my show. And I came on once, and he was just blown away. And by the time we did the second interview, he's like, you know what? I'm going with this flat thing. And he made a website that's still up there today, called testingglobe.com,
Yeah.
where
I've
he
been
goes
there.
through every chapter and verse that ever mentions it, and says, look, it's a flat book. It's the old stuff is true. What science started pitching to us about 500 years ago, that's not it.
Right.
So anyway, sorry, let me end this part with this,
Sure.
which is, all the Christian people that I've talked to, the Christian leaders in this community, have all said the same thing, quietly, which is, they have never seen a spiritual recruiting tool as strong as the flat Earth topic. Because remember, by default, if it is a flat enclosed world, that means it was built by somebody,
Right.
which means there was a creator. And if there's a creator, okay, you only got 2 roads you can go down. One is an advanced civilization that's much older and powerful than ourselves, and the other is God. Well, then you're just splitting hairs. So take your pick.
Yeah, where does it all begin? Gotcha. And and that ties together something that another question that I had was um, atheism. I find I'm just wondering about the ties between flat Earth and faith, and you're saying you're actually confirming that they're stronger than I even thought, because I haven't heard you
Oh
say
yeah,
a
they're
lot
huge.
about that. I've listened to a lot of your stuff, and I haven't really heard you say a lot about that. Are you a regular church attender now, or are you kind of more
No.
just more of a spiritual?
For me, and there's a reason for that, is because I have to put myself in a position where I cannot look. I can't ignore the other 4 religions. If the 5 major houses are Judaism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and Christianity, even though I was raised Christian, I can't ignore the other 4. I can't. It'd be hypocritical of me to do so, because they all have a stake in this.
Right.
And they would all actually, if the world was announced it was flat tomorrow, they would all have leverage against science.
Right.
We're all on the same team when it comes to that. The enemy here would be scientism. By that, I mean when science decides to jump the rails and make huge leaps of faith, and then put their stamp on it, say, "Oh no, that's absolute fact."
Right.
even though we've got no evidence to support it. It's like, okay, well, you basically turned yourself into another religion.
Right.
So, no, I don't go to church on a regular basis, but I have a much, much deeper understanding. In fact, I know more. I have learned more Bible verses in the last 4 years than I think I ever did growing up because of it.
That's really really interesting. I find that
Yeah.
just fascinating. And the scientism thing that you're talking about, I've experienced it, or I've heard it as well. Because I mean, one of the reasons I think I was interested in the flat Earth was because I've been going through a multi-year faith crisis of some kind,
Mhm.
where my very first thought was, what if my faith in God, because I come from a Christian background as well, what if my faith in God is like the flat Earth? You know what I mean? I'm just blind to the fact that what I'm doing is crazy. That was my first layer of the onion. And so I started listening to atheist speakers and found a lot of really good stuff. Like I really like Sam Harris and that kind of thing, but uh, not everything about him. And part of the thing for me is that there's this atheism first epistemology that goes into things these days. For some reason, it's like, well, first you got to be an atheist, and
Yeah.
then all this other stuff follows suit. And it's just kind of insulting to me because it seems a little bit unscientific to say
Right.
first you have to believe something that's not scientifically provable, you know, and then you can be in the club of science, right? You're never you're
Right.
never you're never fully scientific until then. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that, and I'm interested in what you say about um, the other religions and all that kind of thing. What's your knowledge of the breadth of the movement? Like, does it go into other religious
Oh yeah.
communities?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you got to remember, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity share a lot of the same stories,
Right.
so that's not going to be tough at all. Hinduism, they're actually not too far off either. In fact, we've had a lot of channels in both Hinduism side and Buddhism side, and of course, I don't know the languages that are tied to these, but I know that they're addressing flat Earth in a lot of videos online. So they're all, yeah,
Oh,
everybody's
okay.
got
So
a.
you've seen flat Earth videos like in all kinds of languages that
Oh
aren't.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
We only got to remember we only address the English speaking ones.
Right.
Everything that comes out of Australia and New Zealand and England and South Africa and the United States and Canada.
Yeah.
Uh, that's fine, but you can type in, if you want to have some fun, type in the word flat Earth and convert it to another language, German or Spanish or
Yeah.
Russian, and then take that Russian word and throw it into Google
Right.
and click on videos. It's amazing. It's everywhere.
Right.
It's absolutely everywhere. Well, I mean,
Interesting.
heck, I'm doing conferences this year. Last year, remember, it wasn't that big. Like, so I'm leaving for New Zealand a week from Tuesday,
Hmm.
New Zealand conference, Calgary right after that, Stockholm, Sweden. I'm going to be the only flat Earth speaker there. UK in September, Mount Shasta, Amsterdam, and then we finish off the year in Dallas.
Wow. When's the
And
Calgary one?
the Calgary one is I'm going to be there. I think it's the 17th and 18th
Of
May.
okay. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that'd be cool. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
I'm gonna
Check
look
it out.
into
If you
that.
get a
I'm
chance, all you
about
do is
3
type
hours
in
away.
Flat Earth Conference Calgary. You'll find it.
Yeah.
I'm going to advertise it. I'm going to have the woman who's promoting it on the show on Tuesday.
Okay. So I guess one of the things I wanted to do was float by you a thought that I had about flat Earth and its connection to religion. And
Sure.
it might be hard to get out, so forgive me. You're much
That's
smoother with speaking on camera than I am. Do you have any
that's okay.
broadcast background, by the way, other
No,
than your shows of flat Earth?
but I've done no, I haven't had any broadcasting background, but I did a lot of phone and software presentation work. Part of my
Okay.
job for 20 years was traveling around the United States and outside the United States a little bit, teaching people about boiling down complex software in either classroom environments. And then
Hmm.
if I wasn't doing that, I was on the phone doing conference calls with high stress clients that were having conflicts.
Okay.
So I was always tied to speaking in some way.
Right. Cool. Well, yeah, you're very good at it. I
Thank you.
remember Russell Brand was quite thrown off by how smooth your voice
Yeah.
sounded. I thought that was so
Well,
good.
to be fair,
Well, you're quite
Russell.
lovely, and your voice is very beautiful, Mark
Well,
Sargent.
to be fair, and thank you for that. Russell Brand, I mean, he's got some great comedic timing. His
I love
voice
that
is
guy.
not one of his strong suits because
Yeah,
it's a high pitched
yeah,
English
it's
voice, and he
true.
can really get it up there high. I mean, when he goes into the high
Oh yeah,
notes, it's like whoa. He could have worked for Monty Python.
yep. So the thought that I had, which I'd like you to say what your thoughts on, is
Hmm.
that, and I'm not thinking of a specific religion. I'm not thinking of Christianity or anything. Just that that God is the ultimate human intuition. In other words, we don't see God directly, but there are all kinds of intuitions, like little things, little tiny things that add up. And at the end of the day, you just have this intuition that there is some consciousness or some creative principle or some creative force behind the universe that is God. I mean, God's the most convenient word to use for it.
Yes. Yeah. 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 You're at
And
the there is so much fantastic detail in the design of this place. I do not believe in coincidence. I never have.
mm,
Coincidence for me is running into your neighbor at the grocery store.
mm,
That's about it. It's like, oh, hey, you're shopping at the same time. Everything else
right.
is synchronicity. And by that, I mean, sorry to cut you off,
No, that's good.
but when I got into this as a thought experiment, I looked at the world and I said, not only was I looking, it's like, okay, how would we keep it a secret? But then I was looking in the eyes of God, dare I say, at least for a little while, looking at the design and going, some of this stuff, well, all of it is brilliant. It
Right.
is the most clever design I have ever. I couldn't. I'm a huge believer, because I worked in the software industry for so long, of always improving, always updating, always
Right.
updating. I'm looking at this going, I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
It's all the design of it, with the exception of human beings, and
Yeah.
even human beings with all their conflict is I think perfect. But it is perfect. The design is all the little things you see in nature scream intelligent design,
Right.
scream a creator with a grand plan. Sorry,
Right.
go.
Yeah. And so, and even if our intuition is a lot less specific than what you just laid out, that no coincidences, it's very well designed. Even if our intuition is more vague than that, it still feels to me like it's a very natural and, well, I mean, just a constant of human beings that our intuition leads us towards God. And I feel like this is also quite vague. I feel like right now there is a war against intuition. It's not being fought by anybody specifically, there's no leading person, but
Right.
intuition in a scientific world gets more and more devalued. And
Agreed.
I'm not anti-science. I'm not anti-science at all. But when science starts to try to say that all spirituality and all this stuff is not valid, they're just aberrations of our psychology. I feel
Right.
like it wears away at our intuition, because it's killing the ultimate end of our intuitions, and it's
Yep.
almost pushing that line further and further back. There's even a documentary called Insai. Have you watched that? uh,
No.
I think you'd love it. It was on Netflix for a while. It's a really hard word to spell, but if you look up intuition documentary, and it was the
Okay.
first time I'd ever heard this said out loud. And there are some really great thinkers in there, and it was about just how intuition is being devalued, and we're prioritizing the part of the brain that's more about administrative function, more about
Right.
things that are straight ahead and understandable, discernible. Even music, according to some people in the documentary, even music is becoming more rhythmic, because that's the part that your administrative brain can understand, is that
Mm.
even grid tempo rhythm. So my thought is that there are people who are somehow psychically kind of feeling this anti-intuition, and
Right.
flat earth comes along and they don't even realize it. They are on the precipice of that already. They're saying,
Right.
like, they're just tired of people being like, all of your intuitions are bullshit. You know what I mean?
Right.
And
And,
so
it, and it's
the
not.
flat
And
earth comes along,
it's
and because they have felt like there's this world hidden away from them, and then the flat earth says, hey, there is a world hidden away from you. It's the fact that the earth is flat and it's being hidden from you, So anyway,
Yeah.
what do you think
And
about that theory?
it's not just anti intuition. You want a baser term for it because that's one of the things I do. Is it is ultra conformity, which is they are beating into you on a regular basis. Now, look, we have the technology to do this. That 1984 has come, which
Right.
is, and I've heard this from many, many people that have contacted me, usually in chat, not so much email and phone, which is conform. Why can't you be like everybody else? Conform. This is a crazy idea.
Right.
Rope it in. Society is built on conformity. You must stay within the lines.
Right.
And those people just drive me insane because
Right.
I try to tell them, going, you realize if you had your way and everybody conformed, everyone became part of the pack, there'd be no creativity at all.
Right.
I go, don't you understand? We're creative. The big five create, pictures, sculptures, music, dance, and literature. They all come from creative impulse,
Right.
and conformity is the enemy of that.
Yeah. And what I like about this is the way you're characterizing it is exactly what I've been thinking, which it's not flat earth specific. It's
Right.
just the idea that there are certain things that are dogma, that they're just given truth. And I
Right.
know that I'm going to get flack for this video. I know that I'm kind of outing myself in a way. I'm not a flat earther, but I as just saying that we need to accept actual diversity of thought in this world, because for every flat earth, there'll be another movement that seems
Sure.
mad to people, and some of them might be absolutely necessary, and I'm not saying flat earth isn't necessary, so yeah,
but
to
flat,
me
but at the same time, you're right, which is flat Earth, and I've said this many, many times, which is flat Earth opens the mind up for everything. Do I think flat Earth is the end in itself? No, I do not.
Right.
I've always said that flat Earth seems to be the picture frame for whatever the canvas is on the inside.
Right.
You have to have flat Earth to open everybody's mind up, and then once everyone's in that place where it's like, okay, I'm willing to accept a lot more than I used to be able to. I'm willing to not laugh.
Right.
I'm not mock people.
Right. Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, whatever it is, it's honestly, it feels like a setup to something bigger. It's like, okay, what's bigger? Not many things, only a couple that I can think of.
Well, I know you talk about the Truman Show like structure, and I kind of almost picture becoming a flat earther must feel kind of like Truman stepping through that door at the end of the movie and going into the bigger world. Now, to me, there's a kind of beauty in stepping outside the expectations of society, and being countercultural and really owning it. And that was another thing I wanted to ask you about was, in a way, you're the ultimate heretic, and I don't say that with any kind of judgment. And I was wondering what you've experienced, what positive benefits you've experienced as a result of stepping through that door, because you have gone into interviews. I've seen you, like where people just hate you, or they're so angry, and you're so calm. And I'm like, oh man, if I could get that, like I'm not that. If somebody was that angry at me for something I believed in, I could not remain as cool. And it's because you're in the flat Earth. You don't give a shit. You're out there. And so, what do you think about that? I'll stop talking.
No, it's cool. And I have said this before, which is the reason why. And I don't, trust me, when I go into the interview, I have no expectations at all. Rarely, unless it's a bigger network, I won't even do the research on whoever it is. I'll be like, okay, let's just see what they got, because I won't be hypocritical. I can't be. I'm kind of stuck, which is, I know people say, oh, you're so calm and you don't laugh, you don't go after these people and you don't get all defensive. I'm going, if I did, it would be hypocritical because I used to be them, and someone would eventually call me out on that. Which is, look, 5 years ago, I would have been on the other side of that screen. Right. I would have been on the other side of the microphone. And so when somebody comes at me and they say, and you've probably heard me say this on different interviews, I say, look, man, it's okay. I understand you're really ticked off right now, and you don't even know why. That's what I throw at people. I go, look, you're yelling and screaming. You don't even know why you're angry. Yeah. It's like, well, it's because it's so ridiculous, right?
Yeah. Right.
It's like, well, who are you mad at, me or the idea?
Right.
And
you've hit the fence. You've hit a psychological fence of theirs. here there
Yes.
be dragons, and they've never. Yeah, it's something I've thought about a lot, because one of the reasons that people fight atheists and Christians or whatever it is because they'd really love to walk out in the world and feel like, hey, we're all part of the same story. We're all part of the same thing. I'd like to talk to the person who's selling me coffee and know, hey, that guy fits into my, this world in my head that exists. And it really, I mean, it's legitimately disturbing to people that
Yeah.
someone like yourself lives in a world, like the world that you inhabit is so different than theirs. And
Yeah.
it's disturbing to them. Anyway, I don't
And
know where
and
I'm.
it's also the only conspiracy you can't run away from, which
Right.
is different. Again, I'm not going to rattle them all off. We all know there's a whole bunch of conspiracies out there. Every one of those you don't have to look at. You'd be like, nope, not going to look at it. And you can walk away.
Mm,
Flat Earth, really tough to walk away from.
yeah.
Really, really tough.
I mean,
It's not something you can bury in the desert.
yeah. Even for me, I was listening to a Hardcore History the other day. You know that show, Dan Carlin, um, and he was talking about the
I'll say it.
Cold War. He was talking about He's basically about nuclear proliferation, talking about the
Mhm.
Cold War. And I couldn't stop thinking about how the Cold War would be the perfect, because that would have been right around the time that we discovered the Earth was for real, that the Earth was flat in the flat Earth lore, right?
Right,
Like,
right, right.
so I was thinking, oh yeah, the Cold War would have been the ultimate way to get people's minds off of, or to hide, or to totally obliterate people thinking about this new discovery that we have. So I'm
Sure.
wondering if you have any insights into history, like something like the Cold War, and maybe what you think the geopolitical beginnings of the flat Earth would have been. You know what I mean?
I imagine it was very, very difficult for them to deal with. Remember, what we're talking about here is the best and brightest of our civilization didn't even figure it out until about 1960. Even then, the best we had didn't know it. And
Mm.
then they figured it out about 1960. It's like, okay, what do you do with this information? Well, if you know any government.
Okay, at this point, there was a technical issue. Mark froze up. We took a couple of minutes to get it sorted and pick up with the conversation again. Thank you for your patience. Okay, we're back, and we were talking about the sort of geopolitical history of the flat Earth. Go.
Right. So imagine if our best and brightest didn't figure this out until about 1960. And by that, United States and the Soviet Union.
Mm.
Well, they have a really difficult choice to make on their hands back then because remember, back in 1960, most people didn't even own televisions in the entire
Right.
world. Radio was a thing, newspapers were a thing.
Yeah.
So, what do you do? Because, in fact, one out of every 10 people ask me, it's like, well, why keep it a secret? Why not just fess up? And it's like, well, you got some potential problems there. One would be academic, the second would be economic, and the third, of course, would be religious. Academically, every university in every country would have to be retooled literally from the ground up. There's just every physical science would have to be overhauled. The world markets would have to be suspended for several months, even now, until you could figure out how the dust was going to settle. And then, of course, the five major religious houses, the five I mentioned earlier, all now have leverage against science, and you're asking them to show restraint. Even though for 5 centuries science has been beating them over the head with textbooks, not the easiest thing in the world to do, even for Buddhism.
Right.
So it is a tough geopolitically. It is one of the toughest things ever to do because okay, how do we keep this thing a secret? If human beings didn't build this, can they keep it a secret? Well, yeah, they can actually for a while. It's not permanent. It's like I kind of joked. It's like hiding cigarettes from your roommate. You can move it around the house here and there, but sooner or later, the odds are going to go against you and they're
Right.
going to find the cigarettes.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about here, which is all it is for the major powers that be, the governments and the ultra rich, would be just time and money. And
Yeah.
so the lie started out fairly small by comparison. Create a brand new space agency called NASA in
Mm-hmm.
1958. The Soviet Union had their thing and just kind of militarized space and started off small. Well, then NASA all of a sudden got a lot more federal funding and then employees, and now they have thousands of people. It's an economy unto itself.
Right.
Not to mention the other space agencies, which are the Japanese and the Europeans, The Chinese, even the Israelis supposedly landed a probe. I'm sorry, crashed a probe on the moon just last week.
Oh, is that right?
And between all those things, it kind of spider webbed. You know the old saying, the web of lies. And that it just kind of spread out from there to where now we're spending billions and billions and billions of dollars to try to keep this thing under wraps, and it's been failing recently, mostly because of what I mentioned earlier, which was the future that we were supposed to have in all the different aspects of our lives, the Jetsons future, and every futuristic movie we've ever had, and every futurist and every what was it, World's Fair and theme park. It's like, here's what the future is going to be in 30 years: robot servants, flying cars, all sorts, laser guns. Never ever happened, with the exception of one thing, and that was the information and the media. Think about the tools in a simple smartphone. This stupid little thing. It's not even state of the art. I try to explain this to someone even 50 years ago.
Right.
It's almost, the stuff that's packed into this thing. We've got basically the informational tool of the gods now. Everything's connected, and we're talking about a massive network, which is the future. That was no doubt that worked, but that also worked against them, because now people all over the place can share notes with each other. You and I, if I was like, hey, if I have a scientific proof or an observation or whatever it is, I can share it with you and everybody I know instantly. And there's no doubt that the other people are going to see us, and they can share it, and it spreads everywhere. So that has worked against them. So geopolitically, they did what they could. They dragged their feet on the future for as long as they could, the better part of 6 decades. And only now has it started to, part of the answer to what you were asking earlier on, which was why now? It's like, well, because we've reached the pinnacle of our infrastructure. It's not going to get any easier than this. The internet's about as fast as it's going to be. Everything's streaming, everything's instant, everything's swipe right. So they now have to, they've gotten to a point where they have to either finally give this to the public or shut it down entirely. And I don't think they can do the latter. There you go. It's my long-winded answer.
No problem. How do you view then I guess to you there must be an inevitable moment of just final disclosure. There's no hiding it anymore.
You can't do it with just a press announcement. It's not going to work. The UN is never going to publish a thing. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, it's not going to be like a lot of science fiction movies that are out there. Although it will have to be like some science fiction movies, which is you have to do it as sort of you got to segue it in. Otherwise, it's going to be too jarring for the public.
Okay.
And which means you've got to either tie it in with it's a very short list that you can tie this into, because flat Earth is huge. It's huge. And so it's like, okay, what can you blend in with it to soften the blow? Either a major celestial event, which would be staged via some sort of technology, or some sort of advanced race disclosure, where it's like, oh yeah, by the way, here are the very tall, beautiful blue people from Avatar. Turns out they're real. And they've got a few things to say to you. And all they have to do, this would be a great, I could write this, which was they come out and they'd say, oh yeah, by the way, the world isn't what you think it is. And you can't fault your governments because we told them to do it. There's your ultimate out.
Okay.
Seriously, if they come up, whoever lands in the giant golden spaceship and says, yeah, by the way, don't blame your government. We told them they had to do it. It's required. It's part of the protocol. Everyone would be like, oh, okay. And that would be it. No one would claim anything. No lawyer in their right mind would ever sue. There'd be no class action lawsuit over all the billions and billions of dollars worth of economic fraud. Because you can't let it get that far. Sorry, let me segue into one more thing, which is people say, why don't you do a class action lawsuit against NASA or a space agency? It's like, did you not understand what too big to fail meant 10 years ago? And that was just an insurance company. You go after NASA, a military, a branch of the United States military, and you say, oh yeah, we want to sue them into the ground where they don't exist anymore. They are too big to fail.
No, you won't win that one. But
no, you're not going to win that. So, and it's too negative. So you try to do a positive spin on it, and but it can be done. It absolutely can be released. And because of these, You can get everybody. Remember the old criminal saying, it's like, okay, everybody get their story straight. This gets the story straight.
Right.
This, regardless if there's people out there that don't buy whatever this says, if whoever's in power releases some sort of flat earth angle on this thing,
Hmm.
this works.
Right.
We know this, and everyone, because if 99% of the people look at their phones and go, "Oh yeah, I believe whatever this thing says," they're going to go with that.
Right. So, in your mind, when this disclosure were to happen, if disclosure were to happen, um, what do you see happening societally there? Do you see a big return to some kinds of faith and some kind of spirituality? Do you see people going crazy and clawing at the edge of the cage, feeling trapped,
No, no. In fact, I
depression?
was really good. That's a great question because I was worried when I first did this. I thought I was doing the math in my head. And I said, there's going to be a fraction of a percentage that's not going to be able to take it. It's going to be too much. They're gonna crack. And I was waiting for that. As this thing spread and spread, I'm going, okay, waiting for the guy, whoever it is that's going to. In fact, Jared and I joked when somebody up in Canada took a boat and spray painted Jaredism and all this flat earth stuff in a boat and put it in the parking lot of a mall. We're like going, okay, it's going to explode. We're watching on the news going, it's gonna catch fire. Someone's
Like it was
it's
unattended?
gonna end badly. And it didn't. In fact, we did hundreds of regional meetups and conferences everywhere, and we never had an incident.
Yeah.
There has never been, because flat Earth is different from any other conspiracy. It's got a real positive angle to it. And
Yeah.
remember, there's a lot of people. I've got a playlist on my channel that's almost 300 tracks long of positive songs about flat Earth in just about every
Right.
genre you can think of.
Well, that is
You
one of the
can't
things.
say that about anything else.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I have noticed, and I think it ties back into that heretic thing where you've crossed the line now. It's almost like a person who has accepted the flat Earth and is part of that community. It feels like they've got nothing to fear but fear itself. You know what I mean?
Right,
They've taken the ultimate step in a way.
right.
And psychologically, I think that would have a lot of positive benefits. I guess the one thing you're probably you'd really love to see would be a prominent scientist,
Mhm.
well-known scientist to cross the line openly, like you know. Well, if Neil deGrasse Tyson said it, then we would then we would all just believe it. So, I mean
Oh,
that
yeah, yeah, yeah. He is the face of science,
yeah,
and I'm sorry
I
that a
like
lot of
him.
scientists don't like him,
Yeah.
but he is the face of science. He's
Mm,
really good on stage.
yeah.
He's a great public
So
speaker,
likable.
and he's got a lot of charisma.
Yeah.
But and I know your regular, your garden variety scientist going, that's not what science is about. Where nobody's like it. You're absolutely right. No, he fits a demographic that you do not have. He's
Mm,
he's a good looking, well spoken African American
yeah.
who could literally, I mean, honestly, if he wasn't doing science, he could sales pitch anything.
Yeah.
He could be working for any industry and do as well
He's
with what he's
brilliant.
doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So yeah, I mean, somebody like that, crossing the floor, I guess, to being a flat earther uh, would be a big coup
it would be
for the
very,
movement.
very tough to do. And you got to remember, because of how much money it takes to get an education like that,
Mm,
and when you get there, all you care about is being published and your community.
yeah.
And you could be ostracized like that.
Yeah.
You don't want to risk it. You're not going to risk it. You've dedicated your life to being part of this clique,
Yeah.
and nobody has left that clique, and nor would they. I mean, unless they left it as like a group, unless there was
Right.
a financial gain for them to leave the clique, or they didn't care about the community so much. It's like, you know what? I'm just going to do this and let the chips fall where they may.
Yeah.
Kind of like Kyrie Irving, the basketball player. That was a
Right.
perfect example
Yeah. Yeah.
where
Yeah.
he was 25 years old. He had won his ring, friends with LeBron James. I mean, he had nothing to lose.
Yeah.
That's what he thought.
Right.
And but he forgot that it's like, look, they're not going to let this go. Because remember, what people don't know is when you're a professional basketball player, the reporters are in the locker room every game.
Right.
After every game, they come in. You see the same guys. What do you think they're going to do when they get bored? It's like, so what with this flat Earth stuff?
So did he experience like, forgive me, I don't know the story exactly. I know that Kyrie Irving is a flat earther, but did he experience like some terrible backlash?
Oh, huge backlash. Well, I mean, not with his contract or anything,
Okay.
because
Okay.
remember, he had won his title before he came out, just
Right.
before he came out. That's again one of the reasons he came out. It's like,
Yeah.
I am bulletproof.
Right.
What are
Yeah.
you going to do to me? I'm 25. I'm rich, and
Right.
I've got my ring. What are you
Right.
going to do to me?
Right.
And then he realized, it's like, oh wait, they can bring this up every single press conference, and
Yeah.
there are a lot, especially if you're a champion.
Right.
And then he got traded to Boston because he was so big and powerful that he could, he became a marquee player over in Boston, completely new market, and whole new team. But as long as you're winning, they don't care so much. In
Right.
fact, if he wins another championship, they're gonna cut him some more slack. Luckily,
Yeah.
I'm grateful that he came out. I'm absolutely grateful that he came out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, other people have looked at him as sort of the benchmark. It's like, okay, if he's having a hard time, what's going to happen to me?
Right. Because I'm nobody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, fair enough. And this has been really fascinating. Got to wrap it up for now because, yeah, just my family will be home soon. But
Okay.
anyway, Mark, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you. I'm a fan, and I do appreciate that there are people out there with truly alternative viewpoints, and in that way, I celebrate you and the flat Earth. And
Thanks.
so, yeah, this has been really great. I'm gonna see. I'm gonna check into maybe heading down to that Calgary conference because
Yeah,
I'd love
do.
to shake your hand, buy you a beer. I don't know if you drink beer.
I do.
Okay, well then maybe that'll happen. I don't know, but
Okay.
anyway, thank you very much. Is there anything that's come to your mind through this interview that you wanted to say, or you kind of got everything out that you wanted to say based on
Um,
my
uh,
questions?
you know, uh, th- it's not often that people will look at this and say, "Hey, open-mindedness is a good thing." I know that conformity builds empires. I know that. I'm not an idiot when it comes to that. You need people to fall in line, and you need people to believe what the government tells you. But understand that there are conspiracies in just about every aspect of our lives. It's just what we're willing to look at and what we're not willing to look at.
Mm,
And I'll say with this, which is kind of a cliche, and you've heard me say it before, but I'll end it with this, which is don't believe anything I say. Do your own research and ask questions.
yeah,
If you think you have a good beat on things, if you get up every morning, your life is absolutely wonderful, everything is awesome, thumbs up. Hey, great. Don't look at flat Earth.
right,
Don't do it
yeah,
because when you go through this, the tunnel of flat Earth that you have to go through, the gauntlet, the
yeah,
crucible, it is something.
yeah,
And you don't think you're gonna make it. And then when you make it off the other side, you look back and you're just going, huh, wasn't that big a deal. So
well,
there you go.
for myself, I have to say, if there in the future, if I hear that you got convinced the Earth was round, I'll say, I'll tip my hat and say, "Good for you. You went as far as you could with this." If I also hear in the future that the Earth is flat, I will say, "Good for you," and I will tip my hat to Mark Sargent. So it's been a great
Cool.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and yeah, have a great
All
rest of
right.
your day.
All right. Thanks, man.
Okay, bye.
Bye bye.